Hi, this is Jose Luis at Parametric Camp, and welcome to another video in this series, Advanced Development in Grasshopper. In this video, what I would like to talk about is about the development environment that we get when we are working with C# script components within Grasshopper. And if you have been following my previous videos, or if you have tried to write some code in this component itself, you may have noticed that the development environment itself, so the window that we're given, has some features that are typical for professional development environment. It has autocomplete, it has highlight, it has tooltips, but it's not really a full-fledged professional development environment. It's missing like many features, and sometimes it's a little wonky. It's understandable because it's just a script editor. It's not really a full development environment, but sometimes you might feel that the experience of writing code inside of this environment is a little frustrating. So for example, let's say I wanted to create a component that outputs a list of numbers from a starting value to an end value, for example. The way this would be is I would probably start by creating a list of integers, for example, that I'm going to call nums, and I'm going to define that this is a new list of integers. And you can see that the recommendation was really weird. And then as soon as I enter parentheses, the autocomplete kind of killed that. So I now need to go and I need to go and write it again. So that was a little wonky. And then if I want to create a for loop that starts at the value start, I is less or equal than end, and I plus plus, you may have noticed if I do nums dot, if I do dot, I'm not getting autocomplete, for example, for lists. This is one of the main issues that I have found consistently in the C# IDE, the development environment within Grasshopper. So I just need to know that I can use add and list equals nums, all right? And this would work, I believe. But you can see that the autocomplete, the development, well, it wasn't great. It wasn't as powerful as in other development environments. So what I would like to teach you in this video is how to use Visual Studio as a development environment for C# script components in Grasshopper. And this is actually quite easy to do because there is a plugin that is called ScriptParasite that allows us to do that, that allows us to work with Visual Studio as a development environment. If you go to Food for Rhino, which is the main repository where we can download plugins for Grasshopper and for Rhino, you will see that there's this one called ScriptParasite, which if you download and you install it, then you will end up having somewhere here, I believe you will end up having a new component here that is called the ScriptParasite, right? The way this works is very easy. So what I can do is I can drop this component here, and then I can plug in a few inputs. So for example, whether if the parasite is enabled or not. So I'm going to toggle here a Boolean toggle, right? And then F is going to be the folder where the ScriptParasite is going to copy the scripts. So basically what ScriptParasite does is it takes a look at a C# script component, and then it takes the code inside of that component and it writes it somewhere on your system into a project that can be read by Visual Studio, so that you can open that project with Visual Studio and work with that project inside of Visual Studio. And then what the ScriptParasite does also is that it constantly monitors for changes in the files that you have done with Visual Studio, and it updates the Grasshopper definition with those changes. So what are we going to do? So for example, I have created in my system a folder on my desktop that is called dev for development. And I'm going to copy this route here. And then I'm just going to paste it here. This is where the folder that I want all my scripts to be dumped into. And I want this to be enabled, okay? But it gives me an error because it says that this component should be added to a group with exactly one C# script. The way this works is that C#, the ScriptParasite knows which C# script to look and to write into a file if I group it with that C# script component. So now, because both are on the same group, ScriptParasite knows that this is the script that I want to dump into this folder here, which I'm going to dock here, and then I'm going to dock here. And then you can see that as soon as I turn this on, these two files showed up on my development folder. All right. And because this is a C# project, I can double click this and my Visual Studio will pop up, and it will already display a Visual Studio project with the one file that is a copy of the code that I had inside of the C# script component. So I'm going to dock this here. All right. All right, so I'm going to crank this up, and you can see that what I have here is essentially, am I on the way? No. What I have here is essentially, the same code that I had here. It's just that I had the using, I had utility functions, I had all these members. That is the exact same thing. And you can see that the only difference is that I got like some namespace because the ScriptParasite needs to give it a namespace. But if I unfold script, you can see that this is the code that I wrote for. So what's nice about this is that because I'm working in Visual Studio, I now have really nice and almost flawless autocomplete, helpers, whatever. So if I were to say list integer nums is going to be equal to a new list of integer elements, you see I didn't get any wonky problems. And if I save this file, you can see that this got updated automatically, and now it's not outputting anything. But I can do for int I equals start, I is less or equal than n, then I plus plus. Then can you please go to nums and dot, and you can see that now I have the autocomplete for everything that is available on a list, right? So now I can say I just want to add this, and then I get the autocomplete of the items that I want to add. I want to add the value of I, okay? And if I now save this, you can see how it got updated here. But I didn't write the output, so I need to say list is equal to this value called numbers. And as I save, then this should update, but that is also true. Something that happens is that not always does this component perfectly update synchronously with this. So what I would like to do is I would like to make sure list equals nums, and I'm going to save this, and now it just got updated, okay? And I'm going to, and sometimes the formatting between is, so that's also not perfect because this development environment uses a different tabs or spaces than this one does. When we save from one to the other, there's typically sometimes a little bit of dissonance in the spacing. So pros and cons. It's also not perfect, the communication, but it's fine. Okay. So what's nice about this is that all of a sudden now you can enter the world of more professional development environments, and you can harness the power of Visual Studio for developing things that actually live inside of a C# script component, which is kind of nice. And also because you're in Visual Studio, you have, and we are loading all these dependencies, Rhino geometry, Grasshopper, etc. I also have access to everything that is Rhino common specific. So if I type brep dot, you can see that now I can choose everything that is inside of Rhino common library, and I get autocomplete, so Boolean difference, and you can see that I get now compute the first solid difference, and I get more autocomplete than I get more helper text than I get inside of C# script component. So I can scroll through this, they don't go away. It's a bit more stable, it's a bit nicer to work with. Okay. Beautiful. Now, so this is, I highly recommend this when I do a bit more of high level or like big components that have a lot of stuff going on. I always use these techniques, it just makes things a bit easier and faster. Now, one thing that I typically like, so when I work with both Grasshopper files and scripts that live inside of Grasshopper files. If a typical problem that I run into is that if I save these files somewhere else in a different folder than where my Grasshopper file lives, then things get a little confusing for me. So what I typically like doing is I like to make sure that the development files, so all these scripts and all that stuff, is living in the same folder as my Grasshopper file. One solution to that would be, well, just take that folder, copy that route, right? And then paste it here, and then paste the folder here, and then make sure that I use this and I plugged it here. So that is fine, but if I ever were to rename this folder and I forget to update that in the Grasshopper file, or I just move the file somewhere else, then I will start getting into problems. So what I would like to do is I would like to find the path of where this Grasshopper file lives in a programmatic way using code so that whenever I open the Grasshopper file, the correct file path is always there. Now, in order to do that, and this is my preference, okay? That you may just like to have a dedicated folder where you have all your scripts and you're not messing with your Grasshopper files. That's absolutely fine. But I like putting them in the same place so that things are compartmentalized. But at the same time, what I would like to do is I would like to write an example where I teach you how to do that, because in order to do that, you're going to have to write code that is aware about the Grasshopper environment. So it's aware about which file is running Grasshopper, this Grasshopper definition, and where that file is located. And in order to find those things, you're not going to be able to use Rhino Common, because Rhino Common is just for geometry and for managing the actual execution of Rhino itself. But instead, we're going to have to use this other thing called the Grasshopper Sdk, the software development kit, which is basically very similar to Rhino Common, but it's just specific to Grasshopper, okay? So in order to do that, we're going to see how to do that in the next video, where we're going to talk specifically about the Grasshopper SDK. So with that, I think this is what I wanted to do for this video. Again, very recommendable if you're working with complex Grasshopper C# scripts and with a lot of code, whatever, then I find this idea of working on the side with Visual Studio much more fluid, much faster. It's a bit nicer than just using the default IDE. Okay, so I encourage you to give ScriptParasite a try. It's actually quite nice. So let's go on to the next video where I'm going to talk about Grasshopper SDK. Thank you very much. And if you like this video, you find it useful, maybe hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, say hi, etc., etc. See you in the next video. Bye bye.